Thanksgiving night, my mom raised her glass and toasted my sister as the only child who ever made her proud. The room clapped. I stood there silent, ribs already aching from the chair Chloe had slammed into me 10 minutes earlier. No one asked if I was okay. Not when I fell. Not when I limped away. And definitely not when I ended up in the ER with 2 fractured ribs. My name wasn't even on the place card at dinner. But you know what was my proposal? My ideas. My voice in her award-winning campaign. I'm Emily. And this is how I stopped being the family's ghost and started exposing everything they tried to bury. The driveway was already full when I pulled up to my parents' house in Fresno, but that didn't surprise me. It never mattered that I always arrived on time or that I brought something homemade. Someone else would have parked on the curb, leaving me to find space 2 blocks down. I sat in the car for a few seconds, hands on the steering wheel, watching the porch light flicker faintly against the early evening haze. Then I grabbed the still warm pumpkin tart off the passenger seat, straightened my coat, and walked toward the door. It opened before I knocked. My mother, Margot Carson, stood there in a crimson sweater dress with her usual Chardonnay in hand. She gave me one glance, quick and cool, and turned around. "Oh, you made it," she said, without stopping. I forced a smile and held up the tart. "Made it from scratch. Thought I'd bring something a little different this year." She didn't even look. "There's already plenty of dessert," she mumbled, disappearing toward the kitchen. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. The living room was buzzing with laughter. My aunt and uncle lounged near the fireplace, 2 cousins scrolled on their phones from the couch, and in the middle of it all stood Chloe, my younger sister. Her voice was brighter than everyone else's, her outfit just the right shade of festive gold, her laugh timed perfectly. She didn't see me at first, or maybe she did and chose not to. I hovered for a moment, tart still in hand, debating whether to join the group or head straight to the dining room. Nobody glanced my way. Nobody paused their conversation. Eventually, I made my way into the kitchen and placed the tart on the sideboard next to 3 store-bought pies. Chloe probably picked up that morning. "Dinner's ready," someone called out. People started moving toward the dining room like they were following a script. I followed too, out of habit more than invitation. As I stepped inside, I froze. The table was stunning. Krakina crystal glasses, gold-rimmed plates, intricately folded napkins in burnt orange and deep red. 12 chairs arranged with precision. 11 name cards, each written in my mother's ornate handwriting. I scanned the table once, then twice. No Emily. There was one card that read, "Chloe," placed right next to my mother's spot at the head of the table. Another that read, "Aunt Claire, Uncle Ted." Even one for Cousin Nick, who hadn't shown up in 2 years. But nothing for me. No one noticed me standing there. Or if they did, they didn't say a word. My eyes landed on a metal folding chair against the far wall. Probably left there from the last game night. I walked over, picked it up, and carried it to the far end of the table. The screech of metal legs against the hardwood floor cut through the hum of conversation, but no one blinked. I placed the chair down, sat, and adjusted my napkin silently. It was like sitting at a table you helped build only to realize everyone else thought you were just the caterer. The conversations picked up right where they left off. Chloe was talking about her new client at Glonist Brands, something about rebranding their entire skincare line. My mother beamed at her like she had announced she'd cured cancer. "She's always been such a natural with people," Margot said. "Just knows how to shine." My uncle clapped Chloe on the back. "You're going places, kid. Mark my words." Chloe gave a modest laugh, the kind that invited more compliments. She looked over at me briefly, then back at her wine. I picked at my food. It was good, the turkey tender and warm, the stuffing heavy with sage like always. But I could barely taste it. Everything felt heavy in my mouth, like it didn't belong. I looked across the table at my mother once, hoping maybe she'd glance over. Maybe give me a smile. But she was too busy hanging on Chloe's every word. Just before dessert, my mother stood up and lifted her glass. "Can I have everyone's attention?" she said, her voice high and a little slurred. Conversations died down. "I just want to take a moment to say how proud I am this year. Chloe has truly stepped up, taken charge of her career, and made something of herself. It's not easy in today's world, but she's done it. She's made this family proud. She raised her glass a little higher. To the child who never stops making us proud. The room clapped, some louder than others. Chloe beamed, tilted her glass toward my mother, and took a sip. My hands stayed on my lap. My fork hadn't moved in minutes. I felt heat rise to my face, not from embarrassment, but from a slow burn that had been building for years. The kind that simmers quietly in your chest until someone finally says the thing you've always suspected. I smiled tight and unmoving. "Thanks," I said softly, just loud enough to be heard over the clapping. For finally saying it out loud. And I stood up from my chair. I didn't storm out. That would have been too theatrical, too on brand for what they already believed about me. Instead, I walked slowly, deliberately, letting the silence behind me stretch like a pulled thread. No one followed. No one stopped me. Not even my father. In the hallway, I paused by the family photo still hanging above the sideboard. It was from a Christmas 10 years ago, back when Liam was still alive, back when our smiles looked less practiced. Chloe stood front and center even then. I was tucked off to the left, half obscured by a shadow from the tree. Fitting. I walked to the guest room and shut the door without locking it. I wasn't hiding. I just needed space. The air inside was stale with potpourri and old linens, but at least it was quiet. I sat down on the edge of the twin bed, trying to breathe evenly through the pressure tightening in my ribs. The muscles weren't sore from the evening. They were tired from years of clenching. When I was 17, I got accepted to UC Berkeley on a full academic scholarship. I still remember opening the envelope in the kitchen while Mom peeled carrots at the sink. I was so excited, I dropped the paper and it fluttered under the fridge. When I told her, she didn't even turn around. She just said, "Berkeley is far. Do you think you'll be okay on your own?" I said yes. I had to say yes. She didn't ask anything else. I worked 2 part-time jobs all through college. One at a bookstore off Telegraph, the other answering phones at a tutoring center. I kept my grades up, made Dean's List every semester, graduated a semester early. Mom didn't attend the ceremony. She told me it was too much hassle, and besides, who really needed a cap and gown photo? She mailed me a card with $20 inside and a post-it that said, "Congrats, Em." The same year, Chloe applied to the West Coast School for Branding and Design. A small private program with more tuition than credibility. Mom drove her to the interview, bought her a new wardrobe, and paid the full fee upfront. When Chloe got in, Mom sent out announcement cards like it was an Ivy League acceptance. At the time, I told myself it was fine. Different children, different needs. That's what people say, right? But every time I saw Chloe's face light up in photos framed around the house and noticed my own absence, something in me chipped a little more. It wasn't just school. When Dad hurt his back in 2016, I was the one who paid for the specialist consult. I arranged the appointments, had groceries delivered every week, and wired money into their account quietly when the mortgage went overdue. Mom told everyone it was a blessing that the house caught a break just in time. She said God always provides. I guess in this case, God had a Berkeley degree and an exhausted checking account. Then came the job. About 1.5 years ago, Chloe called me in a panic. She said there was an opening at Glonest Brands, but the position required a written proposal for a rebranding campaign. She had no idea where to start. She said she knew I was good with strategy and tone, and maybe I could help. Just a little. I said sure. I spent 2 nights working through her idea, rewriting the flow, adding metrics, creating a sample storyboard. I sent her the final draft, expecting maybe a coffee, thank you, or even a follow-up text. I never got either. A month later, she posted a photo on LinkedIn. New title, Senior Brand Strategist. Underneath, dozens of comments from friends and family. Mom had even written, "So proud of my brilliant girl." That was when I stopped offering help. Not out of spite, out of survival. I got up from the bed and opened the window a crack. The night air carried the scent of pine and the faint echo of laughter from downstairs. I wondered if they had already moved on to Pi. Whether anyone noticed my seat was empty. Whether anyone cared. There was a knock at the door. 2 soft taps, hesitant. I expected silence, maybe a mumble, but it was my father. "You all right in there, Em?" I hesitated. Then I opened the door. He stood there holding a folded blanket like that would somehow make things better. I'm fine, I said. Just needed a break. He looked past me as if trying to assess how much damage had been done. They shouldn't have clapped, he said. I didn't respond. What could I say? That it wasn't just the clapping, that it was a lifetime of selective amnesia. He cleared his throat. You know, I still have that article you wrote in college. The one about women in tech. It was sharp. Strong. I blinked. I hadn't thought about that piece in years. Thanks, I said softly. He nodded, placed the blanket on the armchair, and stepped back. Let me know if you need anything. I will. When he left, I stood there for a while staring at the door. Then I walked back to the bed, pulled out my phone, and opened Chloe's LinkedIn page. She had just posted another update. Honored to lead another award-winning campaign. So much gratitude for my amazing team. There was no mention of who wrote the core strategy. No credit line, no trace. I closed the app and lay back listening to the thud of footsteps upstairs, the occasional burst of laughter. I tried to remember the last time someone in this family had said they were proud of me without comparing me to her. It didn't come. I closed my eyes and let the night settle over me like a heavy quilt, itchy and familiar. I wasn't tired. I was hollow. And that was worse. By morning the house smelled like cinnamon rolls and black coffee. I heard the clinking of plates and low hums of conversation through the floor vents. No one had come to check on me again after Dad left, and I hadn't expected them to. That would have required someone realizing I mattered. I got dressed in silence and made my way down to the kitchen. The dining table had been cleared of dinner, now replaced with breakfast trays and holiday mugs. Chloe was already perched on the island stool, legs crossed, perfectly holding a glass of orange juice like it was part of an ad campaign. She wore a chunky beige sweater, hair curled just right, and her voice floated through the room like a curated podcast. I slid into the background and poured myself coffee. No one stopped talking. Mom was seated beside Chloe, elbows resting on the counter, nodding like a talk show host. Aunt Claire leaned in, fascinated. And how did you land that client again? Aunt Claire asked. Chloe grinned. Honestly, it was all about the narrative. Glonist had this outdated identity, very product-forward, no soul. I pitched a shift toward purpose-first messaging. Focused on lifestyle values, emotional resonance. She said those words like she invented them. That's what makes you so special, Margot said, eyes full of gleam. You understand people, not just data or facts, but the story. That's what sets you apart. I took a sip of my coffee, bitter without cream. My mother had never used that tone with me. Not once. When I published my first case study on AI bias mitigation, she responded with a 2-word text. Interesting stuff. Chloe uploads one brand campaign and gets treated like a prophet. We just wrapped a campaign last month that won the West Coast Emerging Brands Award, Chloe continued. It was for a small skincare line, but we restructured their entire identity. Went from clean minimalist to earthy authenticity. And the growth. Triple digit. Crazy. I blinked. Earthy authenticity, triple digit growth. That was the phrase I had used in the deck I sent Chloe when she asked for help last spring. I remembered writing it out word for word, staying up late to edit the color palette and rework her slide flow. I had added that tagline under brand tone suggestions. She had loved it then. Said it sounded fresh and true. And now she was saying it again. Like it had always been hers. No one questioned it. Wow, said cousin Rachel. You're like a genius with this stuff. Chloe smiled modestly and turned slightly to look at me, almost like she remembered I existed. Her eyes paused on my plain gray sweater and undone hair, then shifted back. I guess I just always had a feel for this, she said. I mean, even in high school, I could tell what people responded to. You either have it or you don't. That was directed at me. I felt it land like a thud in my stomach. Uncle Ted chimed in, cutting into his cinnamon roll. I don't get half of what she's talking about, but she sure makes it sound like magic. That's because it is, my mother said. I pushed my mug away. What are you working on now, Emily? Aunt Claire asked suddenly. It was almost jarring to hear my name spoken out loud. Everyone turned like I'd been reintroduced to the room. I shrugged. I've been consulting on a few privacy infrastructure projects, mostly backend systems for AI accountability in health tech. Silence. Chloe blinked. That sounds intense. It is, I said simply. Mom waved her hand. She's always been the technical one. Very smart. She could fix anything around the house when she was a kid, remember? The way she said it, you'd think I had spent my childhood assembling IKEA furniture, not building the family website from scratch at 12. She's always been good with computers, she added. Chloe's more intuitive, more people-savvy. And there it was again. The subtle carving of roles. Emily the background support. Chloe the public-facing marvel. One for utility, one for glory. Dad had entered the room during the exchange, but stood by the window saying nothing. He looked at me and offered a brief sad smile. I couldn't return it. The breakfast continued with laughter and second servings. I stayed quiet, chewing slowly, watching everyone orbit Chloe like she was the center of gravity. They laughed when she told a story about her flight getting delayed last month. They clapped when she mentioned mentoring a junior associate. They praised her for everything from her outfit to her insight. No one mentioned that she hadn't brought a dish, hadn't helped clean, hadn't offered anything beyond her polished presence. I had always told myself that being helpful mattered more than being seen. That the family would remember the person who picked up the slack, handled the details, kept things running. But sitting there, watching Chloe soak up the warmth like sunlight, I realized something. Recognition doesn't come to those who work hardest. It comes to those who know where the spotlight hits. And Chloe had always known. I excused myself halfway through the meal, saying I had a call to return. No one looked up. Back in the guest room, I didn't make a call. I sat on the bed and stared at the framed cross-stitch on the wall that read, "Family is everything." The irony nearly made me laugh. The hallway light flickered as I stepped out of the guest room, still holding the taste of bitter coffee and invisible edges in my mouth. I didn't know where I was going exactly. Maybe I just needed air. Or maybe I was hoping that if I wandered far enough, I could step outside of myself for a moment. I turned the corner and nearly bumped into my father. He stood there in his house shoes and flannel pajama pants, holding a thin folder in one hand like it might catch fire if he gripped it too hard. He didn't speak at first, just gave me a small nod, the kind that meant follow me. We walked past the kitchen where the chatter had died down. From the living room, I heard a television hum low, probably tuned to some football game nobody was really watching. Everyone was digesting. The food, the tension, the hierarchy. Dad led me into the den. The room hadn't changed in decades. The same beige recliner with a throw blanket folded perfectly over one arm. Shelves with old encyclopedias and ceramic birds. A desk that once held my science fair trophies, now buried under unopened mail. He shut the door behind us gently, like sealing off a room inside a ship taking on water. Then he handed me the folder. I took it without a word. Inside were refinance documents dated from 2022. My name stared back at me in bold print: co-owner, responsible party, lien cleared. There were also copies of the IRS notice, the overdue balance, and the final payment confirmation. All itemized. All neatly filed. I looked up at him, breath caught in my throat. How did you get these? I found out a few months ago, he said, settling into the recliner. Your mother left a letter from the county in the trash. It mentioned a payment that didn't come from either of us. I thought maybe it was a bank error. Until I saw the transfer receipt with your name on it. I exhaled, slow and sharp. You weren't supposed to know. I know, he said. And I think that's part of why it gutted me. I sat on the edge of the desk chair, folder still open in my lap. You should have said something, I whispered. He nodded, eyes on the floor. I didn't know how. I didn't want to start another fight in this house. I thought maybe if I kept quiet you were okay being quiet too. But last night I saw it on your face. You're not okay. I didn't respond. He rubbed his hands together slowly, fingers rough from years of work that no one ever thanked him for either. I guess we're alike that way. We both thought keeping things running was enough. My voice came out lower than I meant. It was never enough. He didn't argue. Just nodded again. You saved this house, Emily. And we let you sit through dinner like you were just visiting. I don't know how to make that right. I looked at him. Really looked. He had more gray around the temples than I remembered. His eyes were sunken with time and things left unsaid. I never wanted credit, I said. But I also never wanted to be erased. You weren't, he said softly. I saw you. I see you. A beat passed. Then he reached into the folder again and pulled out another sheet. This one wasn't a copy. It was an original. A drafted deed amendment with a notary seal and his signature already filled in. It listed me as joint legal owner with rights of survivorship. Dated 6 weeks ago, I went to Jade, he said. I wanted to do this properly with advice, not emotion. She said it was legal binding and overdue. I traced my fingers along the edge of the paper. Why now? Because I'm tired of watching you carry the weight and getting nothing in return. Because I should have spoken up years ago. And because I know your mother won't like it, which probably means it's the right thing to do. His mouth twitched at that, a dry attempt at a smile. I laughed once, quiet and bitter. She'll go nuclear. He leaned back. She already is. We sat in silence for a while. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that felt earned, like exhaling after holding your breath too long. He cleared his throat. I know you might not want to say anything today. Or this weekend. But when you're ready, they should hear the truth. And I'll be there. You're not doing it alone this time. The air in the room shifted. I hadn't realized how long I'd been waiting to hear those words. To hear anyone say they'd stand beside me. I nodded. Okay. He stood and opened the door. Before walking out, he turned back. You always thought you were the quiet one, Em. But you were the backbone. And with that, he left me alone with the papers that proved it. I sat there, the folder still in my hands, not smiling, not crying, just breathing like it mattered again. Outside, the house settled into that strange post-meal stillness, the kind where everyone thinks the day is done. But I knew better. It hadn't even begun. The hallway felt longer than usual, each step echoing louder than it should have. I didn't run, didn't cry, didn't even hold my side the way my body wanted to. I just walked like if I moved fast enough, the pain wouldn't catch up. But it did. Halfway to the guest room, I felt it bloom sharp, hot, and unmistakably wrong. Not the kind of ache that fades after a deep breath. This one lingered deep and low in my ribs, pulsing with every step. I pressed my palm against it instinctively and felt the tender swelling. My breathing caught shallow and uneven. Inside the room, I sat down on the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on the floor. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone, but I didn't open it. What would I even say? Who would I call? I could picture the conversation already. Yes, I was injured. No, no one helped. Yes, my sister. Yes, my mother saw. No, she didn't care. I stood up slowly and made my way to the bathroom, flipping on the light and lifting my shirt. My skin was already bruising, deep purple blooming along the side of my ribcage, just below where the chair had struck. I inhaled and pain flared again, sharper this time. I knew what this was. Back in college, I'd fallen off a bike during a rainstorm and fractured a rib. It took weeks to heal. This pain was the same but worse. There had been no ice, no apology, no arm around my shoulder. Just Chloe's narrowed eyes. And my mother's glass raised like a gavel. Downstairs, I could hear the silverware clinking again. Someone turned the television volume up. It was all going back to normal, like nothing had happened. I leaned over the sink, bracing myself with both hands, and let my head drop forward. Then something shifted inside me, not a rib, but something deeper. There was a moment between silence and rage that I hadn't visited before. A space where the pain didn't ask for sympathy and the injustice no longer shocked. It was the edge of enough. I stood upright, caught my reflection in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because I looked broken, but because I didn't look afraid anymore. I returned to the room, picked up my phone again, and this time I opened the Uber app. I wasn't going to sit here and wait for someone to notice I was hurt. I wasn't going to beg for a place at a table I helped build. 5 minutes later, headlights spilled across the driveway. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I just walked out, cradling my side, teeth clenched against every bump in the road. The driver was a middle-aged man named Robert, and he didn't ask questions. He glanced once in the mirror, then kept his eyes on the road. Maybe he sensed something in my posture and the way I winced when I buckled my seatbelt. Fresno Memorial, I said quietly. You got it. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and tired holiday decorations. A nurse handed me a clipboard. I scribbled my name, birthdate, symptoms. How did the injury occur? Accidental impact from chair. Cause family dispute. They brought me back faster than I expected. An X-ray technician named Lila helped me onto the table, her voice calm and practiced. You're not the first Thanksgiving patient tonight, she said gently. Food poisoning, carving knife, mishaps, even a cousin fight over pumpkin pie. Families get weird this time of year. I smiled weakly. This wasn't weird. This was years of tension finally breaking through the skin. After the scans, the doctor came in. His name was Dr. Reed. Mid-50s, glasses smudged, but eyes kind. You've got 2 fractured ribs on the lower left side, he said. Clean breaks, but painful. We'll get you some meds and a wrap for support. No heavy lifting. No sudden movements. And you'll need rest. Lots of it. I nodded, lips pressed tight. He didn't ask how it happened. He didn't need to. I think he already knew. By the time I left with a bottle of painkillers and a printout of aftercare instructions, it was past midnight. The Uber ride back to my apartment was silent. I didn't check my phone. I didn't expect any messages. At home, I moved slowly, carefully into the dark living room and sat on the couch. The silence here was different. It didn't press against my skin like it did in my parents' house. It didn't erase me. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and breathed through the pain. And in that moment I knew this was the last time I would let them write the story without me in it. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the ceiling above me. I sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a throw blanket I hadn't touched in months, the bottle of painkillers on the coffee table within reach. My breath came shallow and careful, like my lungs were afraid to expand too far. Every small movement sent a ripple through my side, reminding me that what happened back there wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice, one made in plain view and followed by silence. I reached for my phone again, more from habit than purpose. No new texts, no missed calls. Just Chloe's story still sitting at the top of my screen like a slap. I opened it once more, even though I already knew what I'd see. Chloe glowing under the dining room chandelier, mid-toast, eyes bright, smile wide. Her arm around Mia, their glasses raised. The caption read, "Thankful for the vision." The vision. The word scraped against my ribs harder than the chair had. That was my language. I'd used it last year when I restructured a campaign deck for her, the same one that landed her the GLONASS deal. She'd taken it, built on it, repackaged it with the ease of someone who had always been handed polished things and told she had earned them. And now she toasted to it. To my ideas. To my work. To the version of success she'd curated with someone else's foundation. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time I had felt like a daughter in that house, not just a prop at the edge of the frame. The last time someone had asked how I was without comparing it to Chloe. I couldn't remember. Back when I was 8, I won a county-wide math competition. I still remember walking into the kitchen holding the ribbon, beaming, breathless. My mother had been on the phone slicing apples, and when I held it up she'd said, "That's nice, sweetheart," and told me to rinse the dishes. The next year, Chloe was cast as a tree in her 3rd grade play, and Mom printed flyers. She wore a t-shirt with Chloe's face on it to the performance. I had convinced myself that being useful was better than being seen. That love didn't have to be loud if it was real. But tonight I learned that silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's erasure. I rose carefully from the couch and walked to the kitchen, the wood floor cool beneath my feet. I poured a glass of water and took another pill, then leaned against the counter and watched the digital clock blink. 12:04 a.m. Thanksgiving was technically over. But it didn't feel finished. It felt suspended, as if the day had cracked open something none of us knew how to seal shut. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Dad. I just got back from walking the dog. I saw Chloe's story. Are you really okay? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied. Number, I think she broke 2 of my ribs. A pause. He's typing. Do you need me? I should have said yes. I should have let him come. But the truth was I didn't want anyone in this space unless they could enter it without carrying Mom's narrative in their pocket. I responded simply. Not tonight. He sent back one more line. She shouldn't have touched you. I should have stood up. I'm sorry. That word, sorry. It felt small and huge all at once. I didn't know if I forgave him. Not yet, but it mattered that he said it. I walked back to the couch and lowered myself slowly. This time when I rested my head, the cushion didn't feel quite so foreign. My body hurt, but the ache was familiar now, like a shadow that had decided to stay a while. And somewhere beneath the pain was something steadier, resolve that had taken root in silence and now had no intention of leaving. I opened my phone again, this time not to doom scroll or check who else was ignoring me. I opened my Notes app and created a new file. Titled it For the Record. Then I typed the first line. Thanksgiving 2023. Chloe broke 2 of my ribs. Mom laughed. That was all. For now. But it was a beginning. Not of forgiveness, not of healing, just truth. And sometimes truth is the most powerful thing you can write when no one else will speak it. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of a monitor behind the curtain next to mine. A nurse had wheeled me into a small treatment area after a long wait in triage, and now I lay half reclined on a narrow gurney, gown folded loosely around me, ribs wrapped tight, and a cold IV drip keeping time in my arm. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed low and steady. Outside, the November sky had settled into its coldest hour, dark and windless. The kind of stillness that makes you feel like the world has paused just long enough for you to hear your own heartbeat. The doctor's words replayed again and again. 2 fractures lower left. No displacement but deep bruising. Breathing shallowly for a few days is normal. Sleep upright if you can. Watch for swelling or fever. No lifting, no stairs, rest, rest. As if that was possible. Pain throbbed every time I inhaled too deeply. Even the small movements, adjusting the hospital blanket or shifting on the mattress, were calculated and slow. I had been given something mild for the pain, but it hadn't kicked in yet. My body felt both heavy and hollow, like it was floating and sinking at once. I stared at the beige ceiling tiles and thought about all the things I hadn't said. Not just tonight. For years. There were memories I hadn't touched in so long they felt like someone else's life. I didn't know why they were surfacing now. Maybe because silence echoes loudest when no one's around to interrupt it. A soft knock came at the curtain, followed by a nurse with kind eyes and a clipboard. How's the pain? I forced a thin smile. Manageable. She adjusted something on the IV drip and glanced at the monitor. We'll get you home soon, just a bit longer. I nodded and watched her disappear behind the curtain again. Then my phone buzzed. The screen lit up beside me. A text from a name I hadn't seen in months. Sienna. My stomach twisted before I even opened it. Sienna Carter had been our mutual friend for years, someone who floated between me and Chloe, like neutral territory, always loyal to both, never taking sides. The message read, Hey Em. I just saw what happened. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. Another buzz. But I need to tell you something. That proposal Chloe submitted last spring, the one that won her the award, I stared, breath caught. It looked almost exactly like the deck you sent me in January. I thought maybe it was a coincidence at first. But now, I feel sick. A third message followed. I didn't say anything then. I didn't want to get in the middle. But I should have. I'm sorry. I read those 3 texts over and over. My fingers trembled, not from the drugs or the injury, but from the final confirmation of something I had always feared but never proven. It wasn't just family favoritism. It wasn't just emotional negligence. It was theft. I had shared that presentation with Sienna back in the winter when I was prepping a webinar for a nonprofit pitch. I'd asked for her feedback, walked her through the storyline, the design, even the metrics. Chloe hadn't been involved. Not then. But a few weeks later, she called in a panic about needing help for a branding submission. I had assumed it was a separate project. Now I knew better. I opened the Notes app again, heart pounding. Line 2. March 2023. Chloe repurposed my proposal from January and submitted it under her name. Verified by Sienna. I paused, then added a new line. This isn't just about family anymore. It wasn't. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about erasure. About being the scaffolding for someone else's success and being told I was lucky to even stand near the building. I lay back against the pillow, blinking at the buzzing light above me. Every breath felt like sandpaper. The pain medicine was kicking in now, dulling the edge of every inhale, but not the thoughts. I thought about my father's silence. About Chloe's story caption. About the empty seat they left for a cousin who never showed while I had to pull my own chair from the wall. The nurse returned with discharge paperwork and instructions. I signed them with a stiff wrist, refusing a wheelchair out of pride, even if it cost me another flash of pain. Outside, the air was colder than I remembered. Sharp against my cheeks. Clean in a way the air inside that house had never been. As I waited for my ride, I scrolled back up to Sienna's last message. I should have said something. I typed slowly, carefully. You still can. Then I turned the screen off, stepped into the Uber, and closed my eyes as the city lights flickered past the window like broken promises. The driver barely said a word as we merged onto the highway, and I was grateful for it. The world outside blurred into streaks of orange and blue headlights gliding past like ghosts that knew better than to look too long. My ribs throbbed beneath the wrap the hospital had given me, but the deeper ache had settled somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't reach. When I finally stepped into my apartment, the silence greeted me like an old friend. I kicked off my shoes, set down my purse, and moved carefully toward the couch. Every motion had to be planned, slow and measured. I sat down, exhaled with a wince, and reached for my phone again. The glow of the screen felt too bright, too clean. A message waited there. One I hadn't expected. Noah Daniels. I stared at the name, unsure if I should open it. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since he and I quietly let go of the almost relationship we never fully defined. He'd moved to San Diego for work. I'd buried myself in freelance projects and deadlines. His message was simple. Hey. Hope I'm not overstepping. Something came up today that I think you should see. My stomach nodded. He followed up almost immediately. I was in a leadership review with Chloe. She showed a recap of the GLONIST campaign. One of the decks looked really familiar. Like something you showed me once. I read the line again. Then again. It wasn't paranoia, it wasn't coincidence, it was happening. My fingers trembled as I typed back. I still have the original. I built that deck in January for a pitch I was working on with a health tech nonprofit. His reply came quickly. That tracks. I remember your mock-up. The triangle structure, the emotional journey slide, it's almost identical. Chloe changed the fonts and added product photos, but the rest, it's yours. I swallowed hard. I knew it. I had always known it. But knowing something and hearing it confirmed by someone inside the room, someone with nothing to gain, those were two different kinds of pain. Then came the next message. At a company lunch a while back, she made a joke about it. Said something like Emily helped with half of it, not that anyone needs to know. I thought she was just being flippant. I didn't realize it was literal. My breath caught in my throat. Do you still have that deck you showed me? With the metadata, yes, I typed. And I have the email I sent myself with the timestamp. Everything is backed up. He waited a moment before responding. If you want to use it, you could. For the record, for yourself. It would stand up. I don't know what you plan to do, but I'm here if you need someone to back the story up. I blinked. My chest tightened, not from the fracture this time, but from something deeper. Not grief, not anger. Permission. I hadn't asked for it, but there it was. Quiet, unexpected. And it didn't come from family or obligation. It came from someone who remembered me before I became invisible. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened my files. Scanned through the folders labeled Q1 Strategy Client Drive AFT's Brandwork Reference. The original proposal sat untouched, its metadata untouched since the 14th of January. I double-checked the email trail. My name, my edits, my notes. There it was. A blueprint with my fingerprints on every line. Then, as if summoned by the sheer weight of truth, a notification lit up the top of my screen. Industry Wire. Congratulations to Chloe Carson, nominee for this year's National Media Vision Award. I clicked through. There she was, centered in a glowing graphic. Smiling wide, her bio listing Glowness campaign as her independent vision, praising her for disruptive storytelling and original strategy. The bile rose before I could stop it. It was no longer just a stolen sentence or a borrowed slide. She had built a public identity on top of my work. And now the world was applauding. I stared at the image, heart pounding. 1,000 thoughts swirled: how she would justify it if asked, how her mother would defend her, how many people had sat across from her as she spun my voice into hers. I opened a new note on my phone and typed the 25th of November 2023. Chloe Carson nominated for National Award using a deck I built alone. Confirmed by CTO. Acknowledged in private, erased in public. Then I stared at the blinking cursor. There are moments when silence is noble, and there are moments when silence is complicity. I wasn't noble anymore. And I was done being complicit. The sky was overcast as I pulled into the driveway of the house I used to call home. The November chill clung to the windows, casting everything in a grayish hue. I parked behind Chloe's spotless white SUV, its polished bumper catching the weak sunlight like it had something to prove. In the passenger seat beside me sat a slim manila folder. Inside was everything: printouts from the refinance agreement, documentation from the IRS payment, and a notarized letter from Jade confirming my legal co-ownership of the house. I'd asked her to draft it last night after I finally admitted how much had gone unspoken. She hadn't hesitated. I grabbed the folder with my left hand, keeping my right close to my side. The pain meds dulled the sharpness in my ribs, but the stiffness reminded me I hadn't healed. Not from the chair, not from anything. I rang the doorbell. A beat passed before my father opened the door. He didn't smile, just stepped aside and said, "Come in." Inside, the air felt thick. The kind of heaviness that settles before a storm. Chloe was at the kitchen counter sipping a smoothie like nothing had happened. My mother stood at the head of the dining table, arms crossed, her mouth tight with anticipation. I walked in without speaking. I didn't greet anyone. I didn't remove my coat. I simply placed the folder on the table, opened it slowly, and slid the papers forward until they stopped in front of Margot. Her lips curled slightly as she glanced down. "What is this?" "Read it," I said. She didn't move. My father cleared his throat and took a step closer. "It's documentation from the refinance," he said. "From when Emily paid off the lien last year. She's on the deed, she's not asking to be on it." "She already is." My mother's eyes snapped to his. "You did this behind my back." "You left the paperwork to me," he replied, voice steady. "You didn't want to be bothered with the logistics. So you signed the power of attorney. Jade handled the filings. Everything was legal." Margot's mouth opened, but no words came. I pulled out the second document. A printed statement confirming my payment to the IRS, dated and signed by the tax officer who processed it. "That's the money I used to protect the house," I said. "My savings. $14,328. Paid in full last February." Chloe set her smoothie down a little too hard. The glass clinked against the counter. "You never said anything," she muttered. "You never asked." My mother's face flushed, but not with shame. With rage. "So what now? You want to take the whole place, rip it from under your sister's feet. You've always resented her. That's what this is really about." I stared at her, then slid the final envelope across the table. It held a copy of Dad's newly signed will. He's giving me 70%. His share, not because I asked. Because I earned it. Richard stepped forward, then shoulders squared. "I made that decision, Margot. After everything. After what I heard you say to Nancy about selling the house. About not needing to tell me until the papers were signed. Her head snapped toward him. You were spying on me. I recorded it, he said simply. You didn't know I was home. You thought I was out walking the dog. But I heard the entire conversation. About the condo near Linda. About keeping my name off the listing. You said the house was more hassle than it was worth. Her jaw clenched. I was venting. Number. You were planning. The room fell silent. Emily isn't stealing anything, he said, turning to look at me. She's preserving it. The only reason this house still belongs to us is because she stepped up when no one else would. Chloe looked like she wanted to disappear. Mom took a slow breath and turned her fury back to me. You always act like the victim, she hissed. Like everyone's out to erase you. But maybe you were never meant to be the center. I didn't flinch. I never wanted to be the center, I said. I just wanted to be visible. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then she sat down. And for the first time in a very long time, she had nothing to say. The silence stretched. It wasn't the kind that begged to be broken. It was the kind that held truth like a mirror and dared anyone to look. I stayed standing not out of defiance but because I didn't trust the weight in my legs to hold me if I sat. Chloe's hands twitched near the edge of the counter, her smoothie now melting and forgotten. Dad remained still. Not angry. Not triumphant. Just tired. But in his face there was also something else, relief. The kind that comes from finally setting something down after carrying it too long. You always said this house mattered, Emily, he said quietly. I didn't understand what that meant until now. It's not the walls. It's who's willing to keep them standing. I swallowed hard, my throat thick. Chloe looked at me and for the first time there was no sharpness in her eyes. Just confusion. Maybe even shame. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, her voice barely audible. It was easier when no one questioned it. I nodded once. That was the most honest thing she'd said in years. Mom didn't speak again. Her eyes stayed locked on the folder in front of her like it might catch fire. Maybe in her mind it already had. I turned toward the hallway, my footsteps slow but steady. I didn't need to slam the door or throw a final word over my shoulder. The statement had already been made. At the threshold, Dad called out. Emily. I paused. Don't disappear, he said. Not from this house. Not anymore. I didn't promise. I didn't nod. But I closed the door gently behind me. I didn't leave for good. Not yet. A few hours passed. The house remained lit. From the car parked at the edge of the driveway, I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. They weren't eating anymore. No one was laughing. There was no more clinking of glasses or forced toasts. The energy had shifted. I stepped out, manila envelope still in my coat pocket, and walked toward the front door again. No one opened it this time. I let myself in. The room fell quiet the second I entered. Even the cousins who always pretended not to notice drama now looked straight at me. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was bracing. I walked past the dining table and toward the living room where most of them had migrated. My mother sat stiffly on the armrest of the recliner, her lips pursed, arms folded so tightly her knuckles paled. Chloe sat beside her on the couch, pale and glassy-eyed. Dad stood near the window with his hands behind his back. Aunt Nancy was the first to speak. I'm going to say this now while everyone is still here. All heads turned toward her. I wasn't going to get involved, but I can't pretend I didn't know. Margot told me herself that she was looking at condos near my place. She asked me to keep it between us. Said it was easier if Richard didn't know until the papers were filed. Said Emily wouldn't make a fuss if she found out too late. I didn't react. I just stood there and watched the weight of her words settle into every corner of the room. Chloe exhaled shakily. She also told me I should sign some documents last fall. Said it was for insurance purposes, that it would help avoid probate issues. I didn't understand it, but I trusted her. She said Emily would overreact and make things harder. That it was just paperwork. My mother's face twisted, but she stayed silent. My dad turned around. His voice was clear. You see now, he pointed at me. This woman right here, my daughter, is the reason we still have this home. She paid off the lien. She stood by me when I couldn't walk. She kept this family from crumbling while the rest of us looked the other way. No one spoke. I pulled out my phone and tapped to play a recording. I had debated playing it, but the time for restraint had passed. Chloe's voice came through clearly. She basically helped write the whole thing. She's so good with numbers and framing stuff. I just tweaked it. But no one really needs to know that. I mean, Emily doesn't even care about credit. There was faint laughter in the background of the clip. And then silence in the real room. Chloe's eyes filled, her mouth opened but no words came. I didn't think you'd keep that. I always keep receipts. Dad looked down at the floor, then back up at my mother. Do you have anything to say, Margot? She stood abruptly, the legs of the chair screeching. So we're just turning on me now. After everything I've done, Dad didn't move. What you've done, Margot, is lie. Manipulate. Pit one child against the other so you could preserve the illusion that Chloe was the golden one and Emily was just an accessory. But Emily was the one who carried the burden. And she didn't do it for applause. She did it because none of us would. You don't know everything, she hissed. You're right. I didn't. That was the problem. I took a slow breath. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about credit, it's about truth. I'm not the villain because I refused to stay invisible. I'm not selfish because I didn't want to watch the house I saved, get sold behind my back. Chloe buried her face in her hands. Aunt Linda looked away. One uncle coughed into his fist. Dad stepped closer to me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. I made some changes. This is a new will. Jade helped me draft it yesterday. He handed it to me. I didn't unfold it. Not yet. You don't have to read it now, he said. But I wanted you to have it. 70% of the house will go to you. Not because you asked, but because you earned it. My mother scoffed. You're going to punish Chloe for what? Being younger. Being better with people. No one flinched. Not even Chloe. This isn't punishment, Dad said. It's correction. Mom blinked. Once, twice. But she didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked out of the room. This time, no one followed her. I looked around at the rest of the room. At every face that once turned away when I entered. Some looked ashamed, some looked broken. But no one was clapping anymore. I sat down in the middle of the couch, straight-backed hands folded in my lap. This time, no one asked me to move. I stayed in that chair for a long time. People started clearing their plates and folding up napkins. No one looked at me with pity anymore. No one dared to. I wasn't the invisible one tonight. I wasn't the sister in the corner, the overlooked daughter, the tech girl with quirks. I was the one who had kept everything from breaking apart even as I was breaking. Dad handed me a second envelope before I left. This one thicker, older, with slight creases along the edges. It's the original title, he said. I want you to have it. I should have given it to you last year. I just wasn't ready to admit I'd failed you too. You didn't fail, I said. You just followed the silence like everyone else. His eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. He squeezed my shoulder instead. Outside, the air had turned sharper. Fresno nights always dipped colder than you expected for California. I was halfway down the steps when I heard the door creak again. Emily, wait. It was Chloe. She didn't come running. She didn't perform the kind of dramatic apology that earned sympathy online. She just walked to the top of the porch steps and stood there, arms tucked across her chest. I don't know how to come back from this, she said, voice low. I turned and looked up at her. Then don't come back. Start somewhere different. She swallowed. I didn't know Mom was trying to sell the house like that. I didn't know about the lien. I knew some things. But not everything. You knew enough to stop pretending, I said. She nodded, lips pressed tight. I don't think I'm proud of anything anymore. Then maybe that's where you start. She blinked at me, her eyes finally free of all the curated sparkle. I didn't mean to hurt you, but you did. I know. The words landed softly. Not as a blow. Not even as a bomb. Just honest. We stood in that silence. A different kind now. One that didn't scream for performance. One that held consequence. I didn't forgive her. I didn't offer absolution. But I didn't walk away either. She stepped back into the house and I stepped toward my car. At home, I tossed my coat over the chair and opened my laptop. The folder Jade had helped me compile was already on my desktop: proposal drafts, metadata, timestamps, backup files. The voice memo of Chloe bragging to Noah. The original email thread with Sienna, who confirmed she'd seen my slides long before Chloe's award-winning submission. I attached them all into one document folder. Then I opened the site for Glonist Communications. There was a tab labeled Report Ethics Concern. I clicked it. My hands didn't shake. I wrote, "To whom it may concern, attached are materials relevant to a claim of internal submission misconduct. The award-winning proposal currently credited to Chloe Carson contains direct excerpts from my original intellectual property. Documentation includes dated drafts, corroborating emails, and audio confirmation of uncredited collaboration. I request an internal review. Sincerely, Emily Carson." I hit send. That was it. No fireworks. No sirens, just truth placed exactly where it needed to be. Less than 20 minutes later, I received an auto reply: "Thank you for your submission. Our compliance and ethics team will initiate a formal investigation. You may be contacted for further verification." No drama, no headlines, but justice never needed noise, it needed precision. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen until it dimmed. The next morning, the official response came. "Thank you, Ms. Carson, for your detailed documentation. We are treating this matter with priority and discretion. Our team has initiated a formal inquiry as of the 25th of November. Updates will be provided as the process unfolds." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Later that afternoon, I walked to the corner cafe near my apartment. It was small, quiet, with old wooden tables and cheap jazz drifting from the speakers. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window. People walked by outside, wrapped in scarves, laughing. Carrying pies or gift bags, heading to second dinners or leftovers with friends. None of them knew the version of me that had existed just a day before. The one dragging folding chairs behind everyone else, and that felt like freedom. Halfway through my coffee, a message pinged on my phone. From Dad. "Just wanted to say again how proud I am. Not just for what you did last night, but for how long you've been carrying things in silence. I see it now." I stared at it. Let it sit on the screen for a while. Then I replied, "Thanks for finally looking." That night I slept deeper than I had in years. And when I woke, I didn't check my email first. I didn't worry about what Chloe had posted or whether Mom would spin the narrative at brunch. I made eggs. I read a chapter of the book I'd abandoned 2 months ago. I even opened a new document labeled Ideas I Never Shared. Because the silence was no longer theirs to fill. It was mine to shape. A week after Thanksgiving, the world settled back into its usual rhythm. But mine felt different. No more group texts. No updates about Chloe's press features. No calls from Mom asking me to just let it go this time. The silence wasn't cold, it was clean. No guilt, no expectation. No version of me passed around behind my back like a rumor. I returned to Oakland, to my one-bedroom apartment with the squeaky window and the chipped tile in the kitchen. I made coffee like I always did. Walked to the neighborhood bookstore on Sunday. Refilled my fridge with almond milk and late-night snack foods. The kind of life that seemed small but now felt entirely mine. The Monday after the holiday, I opened my laptop and logged back into work. A quiet ping greeted me from the dev team Slack. My manager Jonah had left a message. "Hey, just wanted to say again how grateful we are for that back-end patch last quarter. Still saving our lives. Hope your Thanksgiving was restful." Restful. That word landed differently now, because for the first time it almost fit. I wrote back, "Thanks, Jonah. Hope yours was quiet too." The day moved along in lines of code and quiet. Outside, Oakland's sky was gray but not heavy. A few kids rode by on scooters. Someone's wind chime danced a little too often, but I didn't mind. Later that afternoon, my phone lit up with a FaceTime request. "Dad." I answered without hesitation. His face appeared a little fuzzy but smiling. "What's for dinner tonight?" he asked. I held up my takeout container. "Thai curry." He nodded with approval. "Good choice." I made chili. Too much as usual. He turned the camera to show the bubbling pot and the cluttered kitchen island. Then he turned it back on himself. "You painting that living room yet?" "Not yet," I said, still deciding between seafoam and this weird gray-green. "Go seafoam. Brightens the place up." He meant more than paint. I knew it. And I smiled anyway. We talked for 15 more minutes. Nothing heavy. Just the way he leaned in when I spoke, how he paused before ending the call like he didn't want to hang up too quickly. Like he wasn't done showing up. When the screen went dark, I sat there a little longer. No word from Chloe. No apology from Mom. And I didn't need either. Sometimes peace doesn't arrive with closure, sometimes it comes with space. With the absence of noise you thought you had to survive. I cleaned the apartment that weekend. Bought the seafoam paint. Even played music while I worked. Not the kind to drown things out, just something soft in the background. Something I liked. I moved my desk closer to the window. Replaced the cracked mug I'd been using for years. Finally, threw out the extra chair no one ever used. One morning a message from HR at Glonist popped into my inbox. "We wanted to inform you that after careful review the award entry submitted by Miss Chloe Carson has been rescinded due to confirmed violations of internal authorship policy. We appreciate your discretion and professionalism during the review process." That was all. No further explanation. No headlines. But I read the sentence 3 times. Then I closed the email and made myself breakfast. At some point that week I received a postcard in the mail. No return address. No name. Just a simple handwritten sentence on the back. "You weren't invisible. Some of us always saw you." I didn't recognize the handwriting. Maybe Sienna. Maybe Noah. Maybe no one who mattered anymore. Still, I pinned it on the fridge. A reminder. By the weekend I had painted 2 full walls. The seafoam caught the morning light just right. Not loud, not flashy. Just visible. Like me. And that was enough. I didn't need a parade. I didn't need them all to apologize or rewind time or rebuild every broken piece. I just needed this. A place that didn't shrink me. A voice I didn't silence. A life I didn't have to fight for at every turn. I wasn't erased anymore. I was present. I was permanent. I didn't win anything. I didn't need to. I just needed to exist without explanation. And now I do. If you've ever felt written out of your own family's story, I hope you'll tell me. Because some stories don't need to be perfect, they just need to be told, and we're not invisible anymore.